Hey guys, tonight we slip back into the heat-drenched sands of northeastern Africa. The air is dry, but the Nile glimmers like spilled moonlight. You hear a soft rustle in the reeds, then the tiniest crunch of paws on dust. Eyes gleam in the dark, amber, alert, amused. Cats, dozens of them, sitting, prowling, watching. They've been here long before your bedtime routine, long before alarm clocks or TikToks or toothpaste. And guess what? In this sleepy little stretch of the ancient Nile, they were already royalty. We're heading into the overlooked lands of ancient Nubia, where humans whispered secrets to cats and expected answers. You might think Egypt had the cat worship game locked down, but buckle in, well, gently tuck yourself in, because Nubia's bond with cats goes deeper than gold-lined tombs and Instagrammable statues. And, spoiler alert, you probably won't survive this journey without at least reconsidering your local tabby's purpose in the cosmos. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where you're all drifting off from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge through scrubby grass and thorn bushes, sandals crunching over pebbled paths that haven't felt footsteps in centuries. Before the pyramids, before Cleopatra's eyeliner or Ramses' ego, before cats even had their own emojis, there was Nubia, a long, slim stretch of civilization hugging the Nile between modern-day southern Egypt and northern Sudan. It's a place where people quietly began carving out their own relationship with the divine, with nature, and, surprisingly early, with cats. Not pampered Persians or grumpy internet cats, but lean, sun-drenched felines with tufted ears and desert-colored fur. The kind of cats that don't meow for snacks, but instead silently judge whether you're worthy of their presence. You pass one crouching by a patch of papyrus, its tail flicking like a metronome. Another lounges across a sandstone doorstep, half asleep but half watching you. Their kind has been here longer than most gods you've ever heard of. Back then, the people of Nubia lived in small clusters, villages with homes made from mud brick and palm. The land wasn't easy. The desert pressed close on either side of the Nile, and crocodiles the size of Vespas slid silently beneath the surface. Life required sharp eyes, quick feet, and the help of animals who could see what humans couldn't. That's where the cats came in. One theory suggests Nubians didn't domesticate cats so much as negotiate with them. You leave out a bowl of scraps, the cat kills a rat in your grain storage. Fair deal. Over time, though, the relationship grows stranger and stronger. You begin to notice patterns. When a cat crosses your path before a journey, things go well. When one hisses at your friend's new wife, she disappears a week later. Coincidence? Maybe, but then again, maybe not. Historians still argue whether the earliest wildcats were actively tamed in Nubia or whether they just sort of adopted humans for their own purposes. Either way, these cats weren't just pest control. They became omens, spirits, messengers. They showed up in early pottery, in burnt offering remains, even carved into rock walls along the Nile, tails curling into symbols like questions. You move past a village market, the scent of crushed dates and charcoal in the air. A boy balances a basket of fish on his head, and two cats trail him like worshippers. Their eyes never leave the fish, but their pace is patient. They know they'll be rewarded, not just because they're cute, but because they're respected, revered even. And it's not just the people. They say the gods watch the cats too. One early Nubian deity, possibly linked to later Egyptian lioness goddesses like Sekhmet or Bastet, is depicted with feline features. Ears high, eyes almond-shaped, body lean and coiled like tension. She might not have a name anymore, not one we can pronounce, but her statues still sit in pieces in forgotten temples. Archaeologists sometimes mistake her for Egyptian. They assume the influence moved south, but some whisper that it flowed the other way. You squint into a ruined shrine. At first it looks empty, until you notice the scratches on the stone. Claw marks? Maybe. Or maybe the work of a carver who wanted to mimic the marks left by something holy and wild. There's a story told among modern Nubians about a temple that used to echo with feline cries every full moon. People say cats would gather without prompting, hundreds of them, circling the inner altar, silent until the moon was high enough to paint their furs silver. Then they would all cry out at once, as if answering some ancient call. It's probably a myth, but in this heat, with the stars glimmering just so, you kinda believe it. You kneel near a patch of hieroglyphs, rougher than Egyptian ones, but no less mysterious. A simple figure, a cat, standing atop a crocodile's back. Is it a joke or a story? Maybe a prayer? Maybe a memory? You blink, and a real cat walks across your path. Its paws so silent it seems to float. It looks you over, flicks its tail, and disappears into the reeds. And then the bugs start humming. Night insects whispering like soft static. The kind of sound that soothes you or unnerves you, depending on how many legends you've just wandered through. You lie back, the sand warm beneath you. Above, the sky spreads endless and ink black, pierced with stars that people once used to chart both seasons and stories. Somewhere nearby, a cat yawns, then curls up beside a crumbling statue older than most empires. It's hard not to feel a little insignificant here, like you're just one blink in a long lineage of blinking cats and blinking stars. But don't worry, the cats remember, even if the world forgets. You wake, or maybe you never really slept, in the cool hush of early dawn, with the sky smudged in lavender and gold. The Nile murmurs softly beside you, and somewhere a bird you can't name calls once, then again, as if reminding you it's time to move. You stretch, bones creaking like old temple doors, and continue deeper into Nubia's past, following the river southward toward a time before time. Before pharaohs, before Egypt even knew how to spell dynasty. It's easy to forget that before Egypt became the flashiest civilization on the Nile, Nubia was already experimenting with kingship, worship, and weirdly intense relationships with animals. You pass a cluster of burial mounds, low and rounded like sleeping giants, belonging to the Kerma culture, one of Nubia's oldest known civilizations. No marble sarcophagi here, just carefully arranged stones, bone tools, and pottery stamped with designs that feel at once alien and oddly familiar. A cat watches from atop one of the mounds. Of course it does. This is the era before pyramids and obelisks, before Cleopatra's mascara and Moses's escape routes. Back when the people of Nubia were crafting pottery so fine it was mistaken for Greek ware thousands of years later. Back when trade routes snaked from the Red Sea to sub-Saharan Africa, carrying not only incense and ivory, but stories. Stories where cats always seem to slink in around the edges. You walk into a reconstructed roundhouse, ducking under a thatched roof. Inside, the air is warm and musky, filled with the smell of firewood and something else, something animal. A woman sits grinding sorghum, her arms rhythmic, practiced. Near her feet, a cat lounges, completely unbothered by your presence. This isn't a pet, it's an equal, maybe even a roommate, one who pays rent in mouse corpses. Historians still argue whether the Kerma people actively worshipped cats or simply coexisted with them on respectful terms. The truth probably floats somewhere in between, like most ancient truths. You can't help but notice, though, that cats keep appearing on ceremonial artifacts, etched in miniature beside bulls, crocodiles, and sun discs. Some scholars believe the feline symbolism of Kerma was passed along orally, hidden in songs, dances, and riddles too subtle for outsiders to decode. You imagine one such riddle now, whispered from elder to child. What sees at night, sings without voice, and guards the dreams of grain? Obvious, right? but only if you've shared your bed with a cat that hums instead of purrs. You step back outside. The ground is littered with fragments, pottery shards, dried bones, smooth stones polished by time. You crouch and pick up a broken piece with a red and black swirl pattern. It's older than any Roman ruin you visited, older than Homer, maybe older than written language in this region. A design, nothing more. But if you squint, you could argue it looks a little like a coiled tail. Further down the river, the hills rise steeper. You climb them slowly, sweat dampening your back. At the top is another settlement, deserted, half swallowed by sand. But there's something strange about the layout. The homes face inward, like they're built around a center that's no longer there. You find the remnants of a circular structure in the middle, charred stone, crushed ash, burnt bones. And there, half buried in the soot, a small clay figurine, a cat. Upright, alert, ears pointed. You turn it in your hand, and the feeling is immediate. This wasn't decoration. This was protection. This was something people once trusted when the wind howled and the jackals got too bold. Modern archaeologists debate whether these kinds of relics are ceremonial or just artistic, maybe both. You tuck the figurine back in its place. It doesn't belong on a museum shelf. It belongs here, in the quiet, where the only witnesses are the wind and the ever-watching cats. Your stomach growls, and you realize ancient Nubians probably had very practical reasons for keeping cats around, like guarding food. Rodents were a constant threat to grain stores, and nothing deters a rat like a haughty feline with murder in its eyes. But that's just the surface. Remember that woman grinding grain? She likely thanked her cat daily, not just for keeping her pantry safe, but for keeping misfortune away. In many early African spiritual systems, illness and bad luck weren't just unlucky. They were caused by spirits, curses, or an imbalance in the cosmic order. Cats, with their eerie perception and strange habits, were believed to sense those disturbances before humans could. There's even an old Nubian belief, half myth, half medicine, that if a baby cried uncontrollably for 3 nights, you could cure the spell by letting a cat sleep beside the child. If the cat stayed, the child would live. If the cat left, well, the parents started preparing prayers. You reach a river bend now, where the banks are thick with reeds and the water slows into a mirror. You hear frogs and the low trill of insects, a perfect hunting ground for both cats and crocodiles. You pause, a shiver, a sense of being watched, and sure enough, a pair of golden eyes glows from the grass. The cat blinks once, then vanishes. You're beginning to notice a pattern, aren't you? Because these cats aren't just animals in this world. They're markers, thresholds. They appear right before something changes, before a village turns into a city, before a child becomes a priest, before a traveler becomes something else. You settle for the night near a crumbling pillar, etched with symbols no one has fully translated. There's one image in particular that catches your eye. A cat leaping upward toward a crescent moon, surrounded by shapes that might be stars or might be scarabs. A Nubian constellation? A prayer? Or just a sketch from a person who loved their cat too much? Some nights, the wind brings voices, songs hummed low and steady. You think you hear one now, drifting across the dunes. Walk soft where cats have walked, for they remember kings who don't. A fringe theory, and there's always one, claims that ancient Nubians believed cats were reincarnated ancestors, spirits that came back not as birds or bugs, but as sleek, bossy mammals who could remind their descendants when they were being particularly dumb. The theory doesn't hold up archaeologically, but emotionally, yeah, it tracks. You close your eyes, the warmth of the earth pressing against your back. You think about how the history books gloss over all this, how they speed past Nubia like a footnote, jumping straight to Egypt's flashier temples and lion-headed goddesses. But this place had cats first. It loved them first. It trusted them first. And in the soft dark, as another cat curls up beside you, you realize, maybe that's enough. You wake to the crackle of heat returning to the desert. It's not loud, just subtle, like the air itself is stretching after a long nap. You blink up at the cloudless sky, already too bright, and feel the first lazy sting of sun on your cheek. There's sand in your teeth and a tail brushing your ankle. Not a dream. Definitely not a dream. The cat is back. Or maybe it's a different one. At this point, you're starting to think it's just one cat, eternal, everywhere, always watching. You stand and follow a narrow path lined with stones, smoothed by centuries of footsteps. As you walk, you find yourself near a cluster of small structures, circular, made from mud and stone. The scent of incense lingers, faint but present, like something holy once happened here. This was once a site of ritual. You step into the largest hut, and the air changes, cooler, darker, even though the roof is long gone. A ring of shallow bowls sits arranged on the floor. Charcoal marks cling to the walls in looping, uncertain shapes. And in the center, a carved figure. Not human, not quite feline either, somewhere in between. You've entered one of Nubia's early fertility shrines, and here's where things get interesting, because while many cultures prayed to gods of rain or grain, the Nubians had a curious addition to their rituals: cats. Not always literal cats, sometimes cat symbols, or tails worn on belts, or whiskers etched into masks. But the feline form was there, always present in the background, peeking around the corner like it wasn't supposed to be part of the ceremony, but showed up anyway, and then just stayed. Why? Because the cat wasn't just an animal, it was an embodiment of mystery, of duality, of birth and death, and the hazy space in between. One Nubian tale, passed orally from generation to generation, told of a woman who could not conceive. For 7 years she wept and prayed, until one day a small desert cat curled up beside her and refused to leave. That night, the woman dreamed of stars falling into her womb. 9 moons later, she bore twins. Coincidence? Hard, maybe. But ever since, women whispered that if a cat chose your doorway, your luck might turn. You stumble into the remnants of another dwelling, this one older, even more fragile. Here, the remains of ancient ceramic jars lie smashed in the dust. One still holds traces of crushed herbs, fenugreek possibly, and myrrh. It's thought that Nubians used these blends during childbirth, both for pain relief and for spiritual protection. And who else would they call upon in that vulnerable primal moment? Not just the gods, but the guardians of the threshold, the watchers in the night, the cats. Historians still debate how much of Nubian fertility practice was independent and how much was influenced by early Egyptian neighbors. Some say the parallels are uncanny: lioness goddesses, feline-shaped amulets, purring creatures believed to carry prayers. Others argue that Egypt simply absorbed Nubian ideas and gave them fancier names. The truth may be buried beneath the sand, but you can still feel it under your feet. The pulse of a people who saw life and death through feline eyes. You crouch beside an old wall, crumbling, half gone, and trace a faded painting with your finger. It's rough, but there. A woman in profile, arms outstretched in supplication. Behind her, a cat, mid-pounce. What does it mean? Was the cat her companion, her protector, her deity? Or just her pet, immortalized in paint by a child who loved it? Here's where things get stranger. In some excavations near the Nubian village of Sai, archaeologists uncovered burial sites where small felines were interred alongside human remains. Not just tossed in, but carefully positioned, paws folded, tails curled. In one grave, a woman lies with a cat's skeleton tucked against her chest, like a lover or a child. Was this sentimental? Ritualistic? Both? One fringe theory suggests that cats were believed to carry fertility, that merely stroking a cat during certain lunar phases could increase one's chances of conceiving. There's no solid proof, of course, but there is a surviving Nubian lullaby that includes the line, "May the cat's purr bring your belly to bloom." It's oddly comforting, or confusing, maybe both. You move on, reaching a shaded grove by the river, rare, green, alive with buzzing insects and soft bird call. A group of women gathers here, in your mind's eye, clothed in linen dyed with crushed berries and soot. They sing as they grind grain, braid hair, and prepare herbal infusions. One of them has a cat draped across her shoulders like a scarf. It yawns, totally unbothered. Another dips her fingers in a bowl of ochre and paints a line across the cat's brow. It doesn't flinch. It's part of the ritual now. They believe, these women, that the cat can see what they cannot, that it knows when danger is coming, that it chooses its person based on an unseen thread spun in the stars and tugged gently in dreams. You sit under a tree and close your eyes. The breeze plays against your skin like the sweep of whiskers. For a moment, you hear laughter, a girl's voice, then purring, then silence again. Some say that ancient Nubians thought cats could influence the moon, those same silver orbs of fur tracking the same silver orb in the sky. That when cats stared at nothing, they were listening to lunar whispers. That their eyes glowed not from sunlight, but from secrets. You shift. The tree bark is rough at your back. A beetle scurries by. And there, at the edge of the grove, another cat appears. It stares at you, not like a stranger, but like a guardian. Like someone sent to remind you, this history isn't dead, it's sleeping, lightly. You wonder what the old ceremonies would look like now. You picture a priestess in headphones, holding a candle in one hand and a tabby in the other. You imagine a fertility app sponsored by Bastet, with alerts based on your cat's mood. You laugh a little, then feel that twinge of awe again. Because as funny as it seems, there's something timeless in this worship, something raw. You walk back toward the river, passing another set of ruins. This one is almost entirely collapsed. Just a ring of stones and a half-buried pillar. But even here, there's a paw print in the dust. Fresh. Too fresh. So, you follow it. You step gently into the trail of paw prints, each one a soft indentation in the riverbank's clay. They lead you through a scatter of thorny bushes and into an older settlement, sun-bleached and skeletal. There's something eerie about this place. Quiet, yes, but not empty. You feel it in your chest before your eyes confirm it. This was once a city, a true city. Walls once stood high here, now crumbled into chalky rubble. Stone paths, still visible beneath the sand, curve with intention, winding around central courtyards and communal ovens. A place of structure, a place of memory. This is Napata, one of ancient Nubia's great capitals. Napata rose to power during the time Egypt began to fade. And wouldn't you know it, right as Egypt struggled to hold on to its empire, Nubia swept in and said, "We'll take it from here." Literally. The Nubians didn't just admire Egyptian culture, they adopted it, adapted it, and at times out-Egyptianed the Egyptians. Temples? Built them. Gods? Worshipped them. And cats? Oh, you better believe cats came with the package. You move through what used to be a temple courtyard, now sun-baked and half-silent. The broken columns are inscribed with hieroglyphs, a style borrowed from Egypt but adjusted for local flair. One set of carvings catches your eye. A man seated beside what looks like a lion cub. No leash, no chains, just calm proximity. You look closer. The animal isn't a lion, it's too small. It's a cat, but stylized to appear larger than life. This isn't a pet. It's a companion with power. The line between domestic cat and divine symbol blurred even more here in Napata. Unlike earlier Nubian settlements where cats played subtle spiritual roles, Napata's people weren't shy. They built temples where cats roamed freely. They carved them into prayer steles. They whispered their names in rituals meant to sway the gods. And remember, by this point, Nubians had started calling themselves pharaohs. Not just kings, pharaohs. They weren't Egypt's sidekick anymore. They were the main act, running the show for over a century during what historians call Egypt's 25th dynasty, the Kushite pharaohs. Yup, Nubians ruled Egypt for a time, from this very city. Historians still argue whether the Nubian pharaohs truly believed in the full Egyptian pantheon or simply adopted it for political ease. What's less debated is how fully they embraced Egypt's cat reverence and, in some ways, added their own spin. While Egyptians favored Bastet, the elegant domestic cat goddess of joy and home, the Kushites of Napata gave more love to Sekhmet, the lion-headed goddess of war. And in doing so, they blended the soft and the savage. Cats were not just cozy housemates. They were fierce, magical, commanding. You walk down a stone hallway, half exposed to the sky. On one side is a faded mural, soldiers with spears charging forward. On the other side, a cat, curled up calmly, as if to say, "You do your silly battles. I'll be over here, watching everything fall apart. Thank you." It's around this time in Nubia's history when cats may have begun to be mummified. Not as frequently as in Egypt, but still. Some cat remains found near Napata are wrapped in linen, their paws crossed over their chests, positioned beside small jars and sacred trinkets. You wonder if these weren't sacrifices, but honors, like a Viking burial, but fluffier. There's a fringe theory that one particular Kushite pharaoh, Taharka, had a cat that traveled everywhere with him, even into battle. The story goes that the cat, named Asha, was trained to sit beside the pharaoh's throne during royal audiences, and would meow once if the person speaking lied. Completely unproven, of course, but you can't help imagining a general trembling as a ginger tabby tilts its head and lets out one damning squeak. You step into a chamber with better shade. The walls are smoother here and the symbols sharper. One stands out, a seated cat with rays extending from its eyes. Beneath it, a stylized mountain. The symbol for divine sight, perhaps? Or maybe a poetic rendering of cats as guides between worlds. Whatever it means, the message is clear. Cats weren't just cute, they were cosmic. Outside the chamber, you pass a low platform, possibly once an altar. In the dust rests a single curved fang. You can't tell if it belonged to a dog, a hyena, or something stranger. Either way, you get the sense that this wasn't the sort of altar used for prayer alone. Maybe this is where decisions were made, blessings, offerings, or warnings. Because with power comes fear. Not everyone in Napata loved cats. Some believed that a cat staring at you too long meant your fate had been decided. That if a cat left your house and never returned, you had 7 days before disaster. These weren't widespread beliefs, but they existed, quietly, whispered by servants, old women, and drunk uncles who'd seen things. There's even an old Nubian curse, roughly translated as, "May your path be silent and the cats ignore you." Yikes. But let's not leave Napata on a grim note. You climb a ridge behind the temple and find yourself overlooking the river again, wide, shimmering, patient. Down below, shepherds guide their flocks. A woman balances a water jug on her head. A child splashes in the shallows. And a cat, black as onyx, sits just beside the waterline, tail flicking, unmoved by the bustle. Cats are still here. Thousands of years after Napata's decline, after the pharaohs returned to Egypt and the temples collapsed, Nubia remained. Changed, yes, but not erased. And in every village, every family, someone still kept a cat. Just in case. You find yourself lying back on the ridge now, staring at the sun through slitted eyes. You're beginning to feel it, aren't you? That strange pull. The way the story loops and purrs and sharpens its claws just when you think it's done. Because the history of cats in Nubia doesn't move in a straight line. It curls, it coils, it naps in patches of sunlight. And just when you think it's fallen asleep for good, it blinks. You roll onto your side, still on the ridge above Napata, and watch the Nile shimmer like molten glass. Somewhere behind you, the echoes of ancient footsteps fade into nothing. But ahead, the air thickens again. Not hot, just dense, like memory, like time about to fold. You're heading south now, tracing the old caravan paths that wound through Nubia's hills and valleys, connecting powerful cities like pearls on a sun-drenched string. And the next bead is Merowe. Merowe isn't subtle. You see its pyramids long before you reach them, sharp, angular, and frankly, way cooler than the ones in Giza. Smaller, yes, but bolder. They rise like jagged teeth from the sand, daring the wind to knock them down. Spoiler, the wind loses. By the time you're walking among them, the light is slanted gold and the sand is cooler underfoot. You can almost hear the rustle of silk robes, the clink of bronze bangles, and, of course, the soft pad of paws. Merowe was the beating heart of the Kingdom of Kush, the civilization that rose from the ashes of Napata. And here, cats weren't just holy, they were fashionable. This was the golden age of Nubian cat culture. Wealth flowed through Merowe like wine at a royal banquet. Ivory, incense, gold, spices, and yes, cats. Traded, gifted, honored, carried like royalty in baskets lined with linen. You duck into the shade of a small tomb and find painted walls that tell a different kind of story. Women in flowing robes hold cats like living jewelry. One is draped across a queen's shoulders. Another sits curled in a ceremonial dish, looking vaguely annoyed, as cats tend to do. The message is clear. In Merowe, to own a cat wasn't just spiritual, it was status. One queen, Amanitore, ruled with such power and presence that later stories say she had a cat army. Now, no actual army of cats has been confirmed because history, sadly, lacks that kind of imagination. But we do know she had temple murals showing feline guardians flanking her throne. Were they real? Symbolic? Maybe both. Historians still argue whether these feline images were metaphorical expressions of divine protection or if actual, very fluffy bodyguards lounged near her sandals. Either way, we stan. You step out of the tomb and into the merchant quarter, what's left of it. Broken pots litter the ground. A shattered alabaster jar, delicate even in ruin, glints under your boot. It once held perfume, maybe, or medicine, or catnip. You don't judge. Here's where things get quirky. Some merchants in Merowe were known to breed cats specifically for sale to Egypt. That's right, exports. We think of Egypt as the cat capital, but by the time Merowe hit its stride, wealthy Egyptian elites were importing Nubian felines for their distinctive looks. Sleek, long-limbed, ears like radar dishes. Imagine an influencer's dream pet. And because Nubian cats were said to have calmer temperaments, they became status symbols not just of wealth, peace. One surviving receipt, etched on ostraca, a kind of ancient pottery notepad, mentions the exchange of 2 goats, 1 tunic, and 7 bronze rings for a cat with eyes like lapis. That's either a very poetic way to describe an animal or a very literal cat with magical eyeballs. Again, the records are unclear. The temple priests of Merowe weren't left out of the cat craze either. Some temples had designated feline caretakers, people whose literal job was to brush, feed, and interpret the moods of sacred cats. It was a career path. Can you imagine that LinkedIn profile? I manage divine feline relations for high temple services. Them, so you're a cat whisperer? I'm a licensed spiritual intermediary, thank you very much. One particularly well-known priest, who went by the name Ahotep, or Piece of the Moon, was said to have entered trance states by mimicking feline movements. He would stretch, stalk, and purr until he claimed to receive visions. Most people today might call that sleepwalking in pajamas, but back then, high religious art. But let's not forget the ordinary people of Merowe. For them, cats were companions, vermin hunters, babysitters, sort of, and luck bringers. In some households, it was tradition to place a bowl of milk and a sprig of mint by the door every night. For the house cat, yes, but also for the spirit of any cat who might pass by in the other realm. Because in Nubian folklore, cats could walk between worlds, alive here, watching there. It was said that if your house cat stared into the corner and hissed at nothing, someone from the land of the dead had come to visit. The appropriate response? Offer dried fish and say, "Walk in peace, shadow walker." Then wait for your cat to calm down. Or knock a jug off the shelf. Either way, that moment was sacred. You sit near the temple steps now, just as the stars begin to prick the sky. Behind you, the pyramids of Merowe lean like old queens, weary but regal. A breeze tugs at your shirt, and somewhere in the dark, a low, slow purr rises. Not loud, just steady, comforting. A cat walks by, black of course, always black in these stories. It stops, looks at you, and with a quiet dignity, curls up right on your foot. You're officially chosen. Not everyone got this honor. Some Nubian texts imply that cats chose who could hear the gods. That if a cat liked you, you were spiritually open. If it ignored you completely, well, better luck next lifetime. And this belief spread. From Merowe, cat culture flowed north and south. Traders brought tales of mystical felines to lands beyond Nubia, Ethiopia, Libya, even the Arabian Peninsula. Cats traveled in baskets, on ships, in caravans, not as cargo, as passengers. Because once a culture lets cats into its holy places, its royal halls, and its lullabies, there's no going back. The lines between divine and domestic blur. You're not just living with cats anymore. You're serving them.
You wake, if you ever truly slept, beneath the shadows of the pyramids of Merowe. The sand's cooler now. Even the stars have softened. But there's no turning back. The story pulls you forward. You follow the river again, but this time it's not the Nile proper. It's one of her sisters, a tributary twisting through the highlands and into more obscure lands. The terrain roughens, villages grow sparser, and with every step, the cat grows harder to spot. Still there, but quieter now, moving in the margins of history. Welcome to the Nubian countryside. Not the grand capitals, not the temple cities, but the string of villages, farms, and seasonal camps that kept the whole civilization breathing. Here, cats were less symbols and more, well, roommates. You trudge past a stone fence barely holding itself together and enter what used to be a family compound. It's modest, a central courtyard, some cooking pits, storage jars once filled with barley or lentils. You imagine children running through dust, old women huddled over fires, men returning from the fields with sore feet and thorn-snagged cloaks. And off to the side, a cat, always a cat. These weren't temple cats or royal mascots. They were practical. You might call them working-class whiskers. Their job? Catch vermin, keep grain stores safe, and, if they felt generous, sleep on your feet during the cold season. What's fascinating is that even here, far from murals and gilded altars, cats were still spoken of with reverence. Old Nubian proverbs mention them constantly. One, roughly translated, says, "A home without a cat is a jar without a lid." You pause at that. It's beautiful, sure, but also incredibly practical. Without a cat, your food gets eaten. Without a lid, the pot's worthless. So yeah, cats were both insurance and incense. But these rural cats weren't just tolerated, they were trusted. Folk healers, known as Wenati, often used cats in their rituals. Not in a weird way, more like companions. A Wenati might carry a tuft of cat fur tied to their staff, or consult a cat's behavior before performing a healing charm. One particularly adorable superstition claimed that if a sick child sneezed at the exact moment a cat blinked, the fever would break within a day. Modern science would raise its eyebrows at that one, but ancient farmers? They'd wait, cat watching with bated breath, hoping for one slow blink. Now, let's get a bit weirder. Some rural Nubians believed that certain cats could predict the rain. These weren't just any felines. They were the so-called moon cats, sleek, silver-gray creatures with bright, almost glowing eyes. Legend says they'd appear right before a major storm, pacing rooftops, yowling at the clouds. If one entered your house uninvited, it meant your well would stay full all season.
Historians still argue whether moon cats were just natural tabbies with good timing, or if this was a coded way to talk about omens in feline form. Some even suggest these stories were symbolic, tied to fertility and agricultural rhythms. But ask any grandmother in the Nubian hills, and she'll tell you plainly, the cat knew before we did. You crouch beside a half-collapsed granary. Inside, you see the remnants of what might have once been a cat nest. Tangled straw, a sunken patch of earth, and a tiny carved bauble shaped like a fish. Handmade, worn smooth by time. A child's toy for a cat, maybe? Or an offering to a beloved animal lost to the sands. Loss, yes, let's talk about that. Because in the Nubian countryside, people didn't just live with cats, they grieved them, quietly, deeply. In one uncovered burial site, now just a dented hill, you find two skeletons side by side, one adult, one feline, both gently laid to rest facing east. There's no grand tomb here, no inscriptions, just a stone marker with a sun disk carved into it, a simple image. Yet the implication hits hard. This wasn't a sacrifice, this was a friend. Even now, some local traditions in Sudanese villages, many of which preserve ancient customs without realizing their age, still show cats unusual courtesy. People greet them aloud. Some leave milk out before major holidays. Children are taught not to scold a cat directly, but to ask it nicely if it sits where it shouldn't. It's tempting to romanticize all this, to paint the Nubian countryside as some pastoral feline paradise. But let's be real, there were also frustrations. Cats stealing fish, scratching grain sacks, sneaking into sleeping quarters and startling grandmothers at 3 a.m., just like today. One oral story tells of a man whose prize hen kept disappearing eggs, blamed his neighbor, threatened curses, only to discover, weeks later, that his cat had been hoarding them under the floorboards. Not eating them, just collecting, like a soft little dragon. From then on, the man left out one egg every week, just for the cat to appease its weird habits. That's the thing about ancient people. They weren't dumb. They just had a different kind of respect for weirdness. You walk the trails connecting one farm to another. The soil here is redder, richer. The hills pulse with birdsong, and occasionally something rustles in the brush. Too light for a jackal, too small for a human, probably a cat, or the spirit of one. And yes, Nubians did believe in ghost cats, particularly in the countryside. If you saw a cat that vanished too quickly, or one that moved without disturbing the dust, it was said to be a visitor from the time before. Not a threat, not a monster, just a presence, a reminder. If it rubbed against your legs, you were blessed. If it stared without blinking, you needed to cleanse your doorframe with smoke from dried river mint, just to be safe. You reach a small clearing now, where trees bend low and the wind slows to a hush. There's a stone bench here, half swallowed by moss, and beside it, a tiny sculpture tucked into a root, a cat, carved with loving imperfection. One ear chipped, the tail curled too tightly. You sit beside it, not speaking, You don't need to. Because in this place, the cats don't just live among the people. They carry their stories, purr them into the cracks of the earth, chase them into dreams, guard them like treasure. And when the winds shift, they vanish again, silent, soft, holy. You stir as the scent of distant acacia smoke winds past your nose. The rural hush has settled deep in your chest, but the journey doesn't pause. It never does. History keeps padding forward on soft paws, and tonight it's leading you back toward noise, toward cities, yes, but also toward echoes. Not Nubia now, but somewhere adjacent, somewhere influenced, somewhere watching from the other side of the border. You're heading north again, back toward Egypt, not to retell their story, but to explore how Nubia shaped it from the margins. Because while everyone's heard of Egyptian cat worship, of Bastet statues, mummified felines, and temples echoing with purring devotion, what they don't always know is how much of that obsession trickled down from the south, from Nubia. You shuffle through the desert sand, your feet gritty but sure, and arrive at Elephantine Island, a strategic little outpost on the borderlands, part military base, part trade hub, part cultural mashup. Here, Egyptian scribes rubbed shoulders with Nubian merchants, and yes, cats rubbed their cheeks on both. This is where influences blurred, where Egyptian and Nubian beliefs about cats began to overlap like shadows at dusk. Inside one crumbling temple, you spot a mural with telltale signs. The stylized Egyptian bastet, feline-headed, ankh in paw, but the body's posture is different, less stiff, more fluid. You tilt your head. That's a Nubian-style stance. And around her ankles, little painted leopard cubs, not house cats. Leopard cubs weren't standard Egyptian fare. That's pure Nubia. Historians still argue whether this blending was political propaganda or genuine spiritual fusion. Some say Egypt adopted elements of Nubian feline reverence to boost their own divine PR. Others believe it was more grassroots, traders and soldiers swapping stories around fire pits, comparing their cats and weaving myths together. You duck into a scribe's chamber, still half covered by dust. On the wall, fragments of graffiti. One scratched message reads, "My cat watches me write. She judges my spelling." Okay, maybe not exactly that, but the spirit's there. The original inscription is a bit more poetic, something like, "The cat observes as the ink flows. She is unimpressed." You grin. That's universal. Because even as beliefs blurred, cats remained cats. Regal, judgmental, a little bit magic, a little bit brat. Here's a quirk to chew on. Egyptian records describe Nubian cats as sun-dark and whip-tailed. Scholars think they were describing the sleek, short-haired cats bred in Nubia's hotter climate, sharper-featured, faster-moving. Some even claim these cats had a reputation for being too clever, and Egyptian high priests didn't always trust them inside temple grounds. One scroll suggests that a certain high priest banned foreign felines from a sacred precinct after one scaled the idol shelf and consumed 2 sacred pigeons. You kind of want to high-five that cat, but also, yeah, that's a career-limiting move. Still, Nubian cats kept appearing in Egyptian artwork, especially during periods when Nubian queens and kings held sway over the region. Remember those powerful Kushite rulers who took over Egypt? They brought their own traditions, including feline ones.
Take King Piye, for example, ruler of both Nubia and Egypt during the 25th dynasty. He was a warrior, a scholar, and, according to some recovered temple friezes, a devoted cat dad. One temple carving even shows him receiving blessings with a cat seated on his lap, as if it's a royal advisor. Historians still debate whether this was symbolic of divine guidance or simply a nod to his homeland's feline customs. Either way, the imagery stuck. Later Egyptian rulers kept cats nearby during important ceremonies, not just for show, but as supposed conduits to the gods, especially goddesses. In fact, here's where things get gendered in a fascinating, cozy way.
Egyptian belief typically tied cats to femininity. Bastet, the cat-headed goddess, represented protection, motherhood, fertility, and music. But in Nubian traditions, cats didn't split so neatly by gendered divine roles. They were tricksters, guardians, empaths, fluid in their symbolism. So when the two cultures fused, you ended up with this strange duality. Egyptian temples worshipping cat goddesses, while Nubian healers whispered to feline spirits that weren't gendered at all. One entity might appear as a sly female hunter in one tale and a watchful male guardian in another, or both, or neither. Back on the island, you cross a collapsed pier and pause at a broken relief half submerged in water. It shows a scene not seen often: a Nubian priestess and an Egyptian priest both offering fish to the same cat. The cat, naturally, looks smug. Tail curled, nose lifted, like "you may proceed with the offerings." This mural isn't labeled, it's not in any of the major textbooks. But here it is, silent proof that the feline thread between these two civilizations was more than myth. It was shared practice, shared reverence. You move inland now, into settlements where families of mixed heritage lived and worked. Their walls? Covered in paw prints, literally. Some archaeologists think cats walked across drying clay or wet paint. Others believe children stamped paw shapes into the walls for luck. Either way, the message endures. Cats lived inside these homes, not just in art or myth. They were companions, pest control, spirit watchers. And as more ancient letters and ledgers come to light, we learn that people named their cats, frequently. Common names included Soft One, Hunter, Star Eyes, and Biter. One official record mentions a dispute over a stolen feline named Pert, which, let's be honest, feels like a sound effect more than a name. That particular quarrel lasted 3 months and involved 2 city elders, 1 bribe, and the return of a very indignant cat. Justice, ancient style. As you walk the dim alleyways of a reconstructed Nubian-Egyptian border town, torches flicker in your mind's eye. You hear a merchant cursing in 2 languages as a cat leaps from a windowsill, trailing feathers. A child shrieks with delight, chasing another through open market stalls. In this melting pot of belief and behavior, cats did what they always do: claim territory, on both sides of every border. Whether you bowed to Bastet or murmured old Nubian blessings, the truth was clear. The cats didn't care where you came from. They just cared that you fed them, and maybe let them sleep on your scrolls.
You wake with your cheek against cool stone, the smell of lotus and sand pressed faintly into the air. The stars have shifted again, and so has the ground beneath your feet. You're no longer wandering the borders or rubbing shoulders with diplomats' cats. This time, you're stepping into ceremony. Not just everyday worship, deep ritual, high priest territory. The kind of spaces where incense coils lazily into the rafters, where silence is not absence, but intention. You're inside a Nubian temple, and the atmosphere practically hums with things unsaid. The torchlight flickers along painted walls. Hieroglyphs, yes, but also abstract shapes, spirals, feline forms, strange dotted lines that historians still argue over. Some call them maps, others star charts. A few insist they're stylized cat tracks, cosmic paws walking across the heavens. You can almost see it, a divine cat leaping from constellation to constellation, tail raised in defiance of the gods themselves. Because yes, here, cats weren't just companions, they were celestial. One high priest scroll refers to them as the ones who saw creation from above. Which sounds poetic, but dig a little deeper and you uncover something more. In Nubian cosmology, especially the religious practices around the city of Napata, cats were thought to have memory, not just of this world, but the last one. The one before creation, before order, before sand had shape. That's why they were so quiet, some priests said. They remembered too much. You sit at the edge of a sacred basin, the water dark and still. A ceremonial cat might have once been bathed here, anointed with perfumed oils, draped in colored linen, even offered tiny fish carved from ivory. It sounds excessive until you realize that these rituals weren't about spoiling pets. They were about channeling divine presence. One peculiar rite involved whispering secrets to a temple cat before a major decision. If the cat yawned, the plan was blessed. If it walked away mid-sentence, well, you were advised to cancel the expedition immediately. Of course, cats being cats, they walked away more often than not, but somehow that only made their affirmations more powerful when they did stay. Quirky detail? You bet. But fringe? Not entirely. Modern archaeologists have recovered ceremonial collars, tiny feline sarcophagi, and shrine etchings featuring cats with wings. Not Egyptian-style falcon wings, but great sweeping owl-like ones. These weren't just guardian spirits. They were guides, memory keepers, patrons of the unspoken. And then there's the moon. If you've been wondering why Nubians, desert dwellers by nature, were obsessed with the moon, you're not alone. Scholars puzzle over it, especially the link between lunar phases and feline behavior in temple lore. One account from the priesthood of Gebel Barkal describes how cats were most potent at the waxing crescent. During the silver bow, it reads, their sight reaches behind the veil. Behind the veil? What veil? You shiver a little.
Apparently, certain rituals could only be performed during these lunar windows, with a temple cat present. No cat, no rite. Some temples even designated one speaker, a chosen cat believed to hold the soul of an ancestor. This cat wasn't worshipped exactly, but treated like an oracle. You imagine that now, an elder priest kneeling before a sleek, amber-eyed feline perched on a sun-warmed altar, the room tense with anticipation. And then the cat sneezes. The priest nods solemnly. The ritual proceeds. Historians still argue whether these accounts are symbolic, exaggerated, or misunderstood, but even the skeptics admit the consistency of feline reverence across Nubian temples isn't coincidence. One of the more bizarre finds, a small chamber beneath a crumbled temple outside Kerma, lined wall to wall with cat-shaped incense burners, each one facing inward, like a council of watchers, their mouths open, frozen mid-meow. The soot marks inside their bodies suggest they were lit often and simultaneously. A cat conclave, not a phrase you hear every day. But these were more than decorations. Each burner was carved with different patterns, stars, rivers, even crops. One theory suggests they represented different aspects of Nubian life, and the cats, in their smoky silence, were asked to bless them all. You pass your hand over one of the burners and feel, maybe, the faintest warmth. Probably your imagination. But also, maybe not. Because there's something undeniably alive about these spaces, even without motion, even without sound. You exit the inner sanctum and move into a courtyard where initiates once trained. The worn path they walked daily is still visible, barely. And etched beside it, tiny paw prints again. But these aren't accidental. They form a spiral, a repeating, precise spiral around a central sun disk. One feline circling the sun. That's not decoration. That's doctrine. An ancient hymn recovered from a Nubian hymn scroll reads, "When the world ends, it will not be by fire or flood. It will be when the cat walks no more." Now, that's dramatic, but also undeniably poetic. You imagine a people whose faith was so intertwined with this animal, not just its usefulness or beauty, but its being, that they saw it as a tether, a thread, a keeper of continuity. And when that thread snaps, well, let's not think about that tonight. Let's think instead of the temple sleep rituals. That's right. Some Nubian priests believed sleeping in the presence of a cat could grant divine dreams, prophetic ones even. So temple visitors, especially during solstice festivals, were invited to nap alongside selected cats inside dream chambers. Little alcoves lined with soft rushes, cooled by underground water channels, and shaded by date palm fronds. The rules were simple. No speaking, no candles, just lie still, listen for purring, and wait. If the cat curled up beside you, the dream was said to carry blessing. If it climbed onto your chest, the dream held a message. And if it ignored you entirely, well, try again next season. There's even a recorded case of a regional governor writing to the high priests demanding a chance to dream beside the temple cat again because his first dream had not felt complete. The priests agreed on the condition that he bring better fish this time. It's small, it's silly, but it's so human. That's the beauty of these rituals. Not just their grandeur, but their intimacy. Cats were divine, yes, but also playful, fickle, affectionate, unbothered. Like us, but somehow better at it. You lean against the temple gate now, watching sand swirl across the floor like sleep in motion. And the cat? Still there. Watching, waiting. Not for worship, not for food. Just for the next dreamer.
You open your eyes again, and now the night has deepened. The stars hang lower. The moon feels fuller. And something in the silence is heavier, like a story that's been waiting too long to be told. This time, you're not in a grand temple or dusty ruin. You're somewhere quieter, more personal. A Nubian home. Not a palace, not a priest's quarters. Just a modest, well-lived-in house built from sun-dried mud bricks, with open archways and woven reed mats underfoot. There's a low fire burning, its glow casting amber light on the walls, where faded symbols blend with soot stains and cat scratches. Yes, real ones. You step over a wooden threshold and into a room that smells faintly of herbs and roasted millet. A woman sits grinding spices by hand, her posture relaxed as if she's been doing this every evening for decades. And sprawled across the corner, perfectly indifferent to your arrival, is a cat, of course. She's sleek and lean, her coat more charcoal than tan, her ears large and alert. One paw twitches as she dreams, chasing something in a dream you'll never see. This isn't temple lore. This isn't political maneuvering. This is the domestic side of things, the home front. And in ancient Nubia, homes weren't complete without a cat. You can almost feel it as you settle beside the fire, a quiet domestic rhythm where cats weren't ornaments or rituals, but deeply woven into family life. Not pet in the modern sense, but partner, co-resident, protector. You watch the woman set aside her pestle, reach down and scoop the cat into her lap. The feline blinks, yawns, and adjusts as if this is the 4,000th time they've done this routine. It probably is. See, Nubians believed that cats guarded more than just grain. They guarded sleep, children, dreams, and most importantly, thresholds. A Nubian home typically featured small clay niches carved into the entrance walls. Scholars used to think these were for lamps or trinkets, but recent studies suggest many were cat alcoves, little elevated corners where the family cat could sit and watch the doorway, part guardian, part greeter. Quirky detail? Yes, but practical too. Insect control, snake spotting, rodent hunting, and, according to one inscription found outside Merowe, the cat warns of spirits not meant to enter. That sounds dramatic until you remember how much of ancient Nubian life intertwined the spiritual and the everyday. There was no strict line between the two, just a spectrum of activity, and cats existed right at the threshold. One funerary poem speaks directly to this. O cat of the lintel, watcher of breeze, let no shade pass that means us unease. Watch with your silence, your tail curled tight, and keep out the dark in the middle of night. You don't need to be a poet to see the beauty in that. But it wasn't all mysticism. There were day-to-day routines that made cats essential, especially in desert climates where food needed protecting. Nubian granaries were often partially underground or sealed tightly with clay plugs, but rodents are creative little nightmares. Enter the cat. Some households even had a system. At sunset, they'd let the cat into the grain store. At sunrise, they'd offer it milk and leftover meat, basically a paycheck. If the cat seemed displeased, the family would sweep the granary extra carefully that day, just in case.
One scratched note from a household ledger in the Kerma region records, "Cat has not returned since storm. 4 mice in store. We must make offerings." You almost want to high-five them for that kind of accounting. Here's the curious part. These domestic cats weren't necessarily coddled. They weren't bathed or perfumed like the ceremonial ones. They were free-roaming, independent, respected, yes, but not babied. Children were taught early how to interact with cats, gently, with patience. If the cat allows you to touch her, you are ready to speak to guests, says one folk proverb. It's funny and also kind of brilliant, teaching diplomacy through feline consent. You duck through another doorway into a room filled with baskets, date fruits, dried lentils, woven cords, and curled inside one, another cat, this one older, its fur mottled with time, missing part of one ear. A family elder once called this cat the true historian because she had witnessed births, funerals, droughts, and celebrations, all from this same spot. And now, so do you. Historians still argue whether cats were ever formally trained in Nubian households. Some believe they were entirely feral, tolerated but not tamed. But carvings, textile fragments, and oral records suggest otherwise. Some cats were companions in the deepest sense. One recovered textile, embroidered with delicate red thread, shows a child sharing a bowl with a cat. Another, found tucked inside a burial mat, depicts a cat curled around a human skull, peaceful and complete. The implication? Cats were mourned. Not like people, but not far off either. In one Nubian burial site near Dongola, archaeologists found a human grave with a smaller pit beside it. Inside, the skeleton of a cat, carefully positioned, head resting against a broken comb. Whether it died naturally or was buried in ritual, still debated, but the proximity speaks volumes. You exhale slowly, letting the wind ruffle the woven mat beneath you. The household around you blurs slightly, less detail now, more mood, memory. And now you're walking again, through another home, another lifetime. This one simpler. No fancy glyphs, no carvings, just a series of rooms warmed by shared breath and low fires. A single cat trailing behind you like a shadow. It feels familiar, like every home you've ever known, where pets become part of the furniture, the rhythm, the emotional weather. And maybe that's the quiet genius of it. Cats weren't just symbolic in temples or strategic in trade, they were intimate. They were part of the inside jokes, the bedtime rituals, the stories passed from grandmother to child, the ones told just before sleep took hold, when the fire cracked low and the wind outside whispered through reed shutters. One of those stories? That every cat has walked the desert of the dead and returned. That their eyes remember what we forget. That when you're unsure, uneasy, or unmoored, find the cat. She's already seen the ending, and she's not worried. You close your eyes now, with the weight of domestic peace settling around your shoulders. No grandeur, no myth, just warmth, fur, quiet understanding. And that deep Nubian truth. Where there is a cat, there is a home. You wake into sand again, hot beneath your feet, bright in your eyes. But you're not in a home anymore. The quiet intimacy of that Nubian household has drifted away, like the curl of a cat's tail disappearing behind a curtain.
Now, you're under the open sky, and ahead of you stretches something wide, rhythmic, and deeply alive, a marketplace. It hums, not in noise exactly, but in movement. Sandaled feet scuffle along beaten paths, traders call out soft bargains, and the breeze flaps through canvas awnings. But among all the bustle, woven baskets, pottery, pulses, beads, your eyes catch movement at ground level. Cats, again, always. They thread between ankles like seasoned negotiators, hop up onto grain sacks with the confidence of permanent staff, and perch lazily in shaded corners as if overseeing operations. You're in a Nubian trade hub, maybe Kawa, maybe Sai Island, maybe a lost town whose name has long slipped away like water in the Nile. But what's obvious is this: commerce and cats go hand in paw. Historians still debate just how economically intertwined cats were with trade routes, but what we do know is this: where goods moved, cats followed, or rather, stayed. And merchants, smart as they were, began to bring cats with them. Think of them as the original inventory control. You're watching a spice merchant open his boat's cargo hold. Dried peppercorns, bundles of cinnamon, fine powdery incense, and before he even begins to unload, a tabby springs out ahead of him, stretching, yawning, inspecting the dock like a small, furry customs officer. "She's the only reason I have anything left," the merchant jokes to a passing buyer. You can't help but smirk. This isn't exaggerated. Nubian traders, especially those dealing in grain, textiles, and dried meats, knew the value of a good mouser. Some even paid premiums for cats proven to have made previous trade journeys successfully, sort of like hiring a seasoned sailor, except with better balance and no loud opinions. There are even references in regional records to cat allowances, extra provisions of dried fish or milk traded specifically to keep these four-legged protectors well fed during long voyages. Quirky? Sure, but also practical. And cats didn't just serve merchants, they charmed customers. That's right, people were more likely to visit a stall with a relaxed cat dozing nearby. It signaled stability, cleanliness, familiarity. You can imagine it now. A woman reaching for a new ceramic jar while a kitten rubs her ankle. Maybe she wasn't planning to buy two, but who can resist a kitten's approval? This isn't nostalgia talking. Ancient murals, etched onto the walls of mud brick shops, sometimes show cats lying beneath trade tables or snoozing in clay bowls beside beads and die cakes. Whether they were artistic whims or accurate snapshots, they tell you this much: cats belonged here. One mural near Old Dongola shows something a little weirder: a cat curled up beside what looks like a crocodile skull. A local legend, perhaps, or maybe a trade blessing. Scholars aren't sure, but the accompanying symbol, a looped rope and fish, suggests prosperity. There's a whispered tale from the Nubian gold routes too. Miners believed cats could sniff out not just rats, but cursed tunnels. They walk ahead. If they return, you dig. If they vanish, you leave, goes the saying. Cynics dismiss it, but you watch now as a caravan leader pauses at a tunnel mouth, staring after a dark-furred cat who walks halfway in and bolts back out. No digging today. And it's not just land trade. You follow a stretch of the Nile now where boats pull in and out of small ports. These river traders faced their own set of rodent nightmares. Grain sacks chewed through before they reached market. But with a cat on board, problem solved. In fact, cats became so associated with safe river travel that some boats were painted with feline eyes on the front, part warding symbol, part superstition. And in rare cases, river contracts mention guardian of the hold, likely referring to the ship's resident cat.
One such contract reads, "Should the guardian perish in passage, equal silver must be paid to the keeper for a new watcher." That's insurance for a cat. You can't help but laugh softly. Imagine trying to tell modern-day shipping companies that their safety audit should include a sleeping calico. As you meander deeper into the marketplace, you notice how cats aren't just working the crowd, they are the crowd. Revered, yes, but not aloof. Just part of the architecture.
They climb woven baskets, steal tiny bites from unattended plates, curl on ledges while sandal sellers haggle beneath them. And when a loud clang startles everyone near the bronze stall, it's the cats who move first, leaping to safety with uncanny coordination, then returning to their perches exactly 2 seconds after it's clear the world isn't ending. Because that's the thing about cats, isn't it? That eerie, infuriating confidence. In Nubia, it became a kind of standard, a model to imitate. Merchants told apprentices, "Move like a cat, watch before speaking, don't reveal your offer until you must." And when a deal went particularly well, one might say, "The cat smiled on us." But it wasn't all metaphor. There are records of merchants actually gifting cats, especially rare-colored ones, to gain favor with high-status buyers. A black cat with one white paw? Priceless. A long-tailed, gold-tipped one? That's a diplomatic gesture. It wasn't just commerce, it was charisma. One late-period Nubian poem reads, "May your market never lack the cat's tail. May her shadow cross your tent at dawn. May her whiskers twitch at dishonest scales." So maybe that's what made the market feel so alive. It wasn't just spices and cloth and barley being traded, it was trust, routine, the shared belief that if a cat sat calmly near your stall, things were probably okay. And tonight, as the market begins to wind down, sun dipping low, merchants packing up, sandals dragging, we find ourselves at one final stall. It's modest, a few clay beads, a handful of simple charms, and nestled among them, a small bronze cat figurine. The merchant nods when you look at it. "Good luck," she says, then adds with a grin, "and not just in trade." You pick it up. It's heavier than it looks. Tail curled, eyes alert, that calm, confident pose. And somehow, holding it in your hand, you feel a little steadier yourself. Because in the chaotic, ever-bargaining world of ancient Nubian markets, the cat wasn't just protector or pest control. It was a symbol, a constant, a small living reminder that even in trade and toil, there could be stillness, clarity, balance. And somewhere, on a woven mat or a sun-warmed stone, a cat is probably watching you now, judging your deal, approving your choices, and flicking its tail just so. The sun has dipped lower now, dragging streaks of gold across the Nubian sky. You turn from the lively hum of the market and follow a long, winding path toward the edge of a quiet settlement. It's calmer out here, fewer voices, fewer carts, just the rhythmic chirp of desert insects and the rustle of dry grass. But even here, yes, you guessed it, cats are watching. You spot one first, crouched low near a fence post, tail twitching like it's caught a whiff of something worth pouncing on. A few steps later, there's another, basking lazily on a flat stone, belly exposed to the fading heat. And then it hits you. This place isn't a village exactly. It's not a home or a market. It's something more mysterious, more layered. You're standing at the threshold of sacred ground. This is a Nubian necropolis. Rows of low mounds and faded markers stretch ahead, quiet but far from empty. You're not in the grandeur of Egyptian-style pyramids now, though Nubia had those too. No, this is a more local resting ground, likely belonging to a mid-tier community or noble family, humble but holy. And the cats? They're still here. Historians still argue whether cats in Nubian cemeteries were drawn by instinct or guided by ritual. Maybe both. But what's clear is this: they were present. In fact, cats appear frequently in funerary art and burial goods from the Kingdom of Kush, often small, carved from bone or stone, slipped into tombs alongside the departed, not as afterthoughts, as guides. You step lightly between the graves now, careful not to disturb the cracked earth or wind-worn carvings. You spot a crumbled statue, half buried in dust, feline shape, one ear missing, its back arched just slightly. Not menacing, more alert. An inscription nearby, weathered but readable, says simply, "Watcher of the quiet path." And you pause. Because here, in the silence of this sacred space, cats were more than helpers or companions. They were liminal beings, walkers between realms. They padded at the edges of sleep and death with the same indifference they brought to sunbathing on rooftops. One Nubian myth suggests that cats could hear the dead, not in a ghost hunter kind of way, more like attuned, sensitive to thin spaces in the world, thresholds where breath ends and silence begins. You think back to that home shrine, the carved cat above the doorway. What if this wasn't just superstition, but instinct? There's a burial site near Moreau where multiple cats were entombed, not as sacrifices, but as mourners. Their skeletons were carefully arranged near the deceased, some curled at the feet, others nestled near the head. One even had a collar of braided reed and cowrie shells. Was it grief or honor? Quirky detail time? One tomb contained a clay bowl with paw prints baked into its surface, not painted, real ones. As if the cat stepped across while it was drying, and instead of correcting it, the artisan left it there. A permanent mark of presence. Maybe it was intentional, maybe not, but now it rests beside someone's ribcage, millennia later, still watching. You reach a cluster of graves now that feel different, maybe, or simply better preserved. Here, faint paintings still cling to the rock, a procession of animals, goats, ibises, a lion, and in the lead, of course. It walks with head high, tail up, golden eyes painted bright against a red sunburst.
This wasn't just symbolic. Nubians may have believed cats could serve as spiritual escorts, guiding souls safely across the perilous journey of the afterlife. Not unlike the Egyptian concept of the afterlife voyage, but less bureaucratic, less judgment-heavy, more quiet. A story still told in parts of modern Nubia speaks of night cats, mysterious spirits who walk with the dead and soothe their passage. They're said to sit beside fresh graves and yawn, sending bad spirits fleeing with the sound. You glance at the cat beside you now, half asleep on a sun-baked stone. A yawn escapes her. Maybe she's just tired, or maybe she's guarding something you can't quite see. Further into the necropolis, you find what looks like a broken stela, flat, rectangular, tilted in the sand. It's cracked through the middle, but the engraving is still visible. It shows a woman reclining beneath a fig tree, her hand outstretched toward a cat curled beside her. Above them, a line of stars. Beneath, a winding river. The caption reads, "Let her cross in comfort, with the cat to guide her feet." It's such a soft, human wish. You can feel it in your bones, the kind of prayer whispered more than carved. You imagine a family member drawing it into the dirt before the burial, the cat brushing against their leg, pausing, then disappearing into the reeds. A final sign, a blessing. Some scholars argue that this sort of reverence stemmed from cats' ability to predict, or seem to predict, natural phenomena. Before earthquakes or storms, cats acted strange, restless, skittish. To the ancient Nubians, this wasn't just animal instinct, it was awareness. So in cemeteries, their presence was reassurance that something beyond language was keeping watch. The wind picks up slightly now, rustling across the graves like breath across skin. The cats don't flinch, they've heard it all before. You pause at a final tomb, larger, more ornate. A symbol is etched on its front, not a name, not a title, just a single paw print surrounded by stars. No one knows who rests here. The grave was looted long ago, but that symbol remained untouched, protected somehow. And next to it, a carved offering dish, still half filled with petrified fish bones. Either someone made offerings, or someone expected a return. You sit beside the tomb for a moment. The cats gather. One hops onto the stone beside you, circles once, and sells with a sigh. Like it knows you needed that. You don't speak,
You don't need to. Because here, at the edge of life and legend, where the living remember and the dead wait quietly, the cats are still working, still watching, still walking softly between what is and what was. And with that gentle, eternal silence, they make even death feel a little less final. The stars have begun to prick the Nubian sky, one by one, like soft pins in velvet. You leave the necropolis behind, quiet now, sacred ground fading into memory, and follow a worn footpath heading east, where the river bends and villages once tucked into the curve like sleeping cats. The air shifts, still warm but softer, sweeter. You hear faint drumming, distant, slow, like someone's heartbeat echoing through a gourd drum, and over it, laughter. You're approaching a festival. Well, what's left of one. By the time you arrive, the main festivities have died down. Torches flicker low, reeds rustle with movement, and people are reclining on woven mats, bellies full of roasted millet cakes and honey beer. Children chase fireflies, or try to, and older folks trade stories wrapped in the haze of twilight. And somewhere, purring softly, are the cats. Not just one or two, dozens, moving through the crowd like wisps of smoke. Some steal bits of food. Others curl into warm laps, accepting idle pets, like royalties being granted a brief audience with their subjects. Tonight isn't just a party, it's a seasonal celebration, a harvest blessing, a moment to thank the land, the water, the sun, and, yes, the cats. See, in some corners of Nubia, cats weren't just tolerated during feasts, they were invited. This might sound odd, but you spot a mat off to the side, decorated with painted fish and set with small clay dishes. Someone's left offerings, bits of cooked chicken, a few slivers of fish, even a splash of milk. It's a feline feast. One woman whispers nearby, "Let them eat first, and the spirits follow happy." You raise an eyebrow, but say nothing. Because this belief that cats could attract blessings, or at least not anger the unseen, was woven into the fabric of seasonal rituals. Not major temple rites, but village customs, passed quietly, generation to generation. One quirky record from a Nubian hill village describes a cat call, not the rude kind, but an actual group chant used during late autumn festivals. People would mimic cat meows to invite strays in, hoping a specific cat, a white one with black rings around its eyes. If it did, good planting season ahead. If not, well, better plant twice as much and hope. Historians still argue whether these feline festivities were formal religion or folkloric fun. But does it matter? What's clear is that these people believed, deep in their sun-warmed bones, that cats brought something with them. Luck, balance, or maybe just a gentle reminder not to take the world too seriously. You settle into the soft sand, watching a little girl share her lentil cake with a patchy gray tom. Her father laughs and shakes his head, but doesn't stop her. "He eats better than I do," he mutters.
Nearby, a low fire burns. Someone tosses in a handful of herbs, sandalwood maybe, or desert sage, and the smoke curls upward like a cat's tail. People begin to hum, low and rhythmic, the kind of sound that doesn't need words, a sound to settle your breath. Then comes a story. An elder leans forward. Her eyes are cloudy but sharp. Her voice crackles like dry leaves. She speaks in slow syllables. "There was once a boy who mocked the cats, kicked them, threw stones, said they were thieves. But when he fell ill, none came to his door. The village healer said, 'Even the cats won't cross your threshold.' He begged forgiveness, left bowls of milk outside every night. But only when one old cat slept on his chest did his fever break." The group nods solemnly, like this tale is as true as the stars above them. And who's to say it isn't? Another person, barely more than a teen, offers a different story. This one is lighter. A cat tricked a crocodile, he grins, eyes wide. Pretended to limp along the riverbank so the beast would lunge and fall into a dry pit. The cat danced on the edge and said, "Next time, bring a ladder." Laughter ripples through the crowd. You chuckle too. Because sure, it's silly, but it fits. Cats would do that. And here, under Nubia's stars, that cleverness wasn't just admired, it was treasured, honored. There's evidence, that cat-like traits were praised in children. Sharp observation, quiet curiosity, graceful movement. You walk like a cat was a compliment. So was you listen like one. You're reminded of a Nubian lullaby that hums quietly in your mind now. Maybe you heard it earlier, drifting from a hut. Maybe you imagined it. Either way, it goes. Soft is the fur that watches the night. Eyes of the moon, paws full of light. Sleep now, child, where no claws go. The cat is near, and the wind walks slow. Could be a dream, could be memory. Across the fire, someone sets down a small carved statue, a cat, of course, next to a bowl of beer. Not to drink, to honor. You've seen this before in temple offerings, but here it's something else. Less grand, more human. A way to remember something simple. Cats don't need much, and maybe neither do we. Just warmth, food, a little company, and something soft to curl into when the wind rises. As the fire dies down, the group begins to drift apart. Some head back to their homes. Others stretch out under the stars. A few cats follow. Others stay, licking their paws, completely unbothered. You stay a moment longer, soaking in the heat of the stones, the softness of the earth, the whisper of old stories circling overhead like smoke. And then, just as you stand, you spot something in the sand. A paw print. Not fresh, not fading either, just there. You smile. You don't need a blessing tonight. You've already been given one.
The next morning comes slowly. You wake up beneath a tree, cradled in quiet shade, with the river whispering somewhere beyond your sight. The cats are gone, for now, but their presence lingers like the softness of a dream you don't want to leave. You stretch, brush dust from your clothes, and follow the faint trail toward a cluster of structures carved into the base of a bluff. These aren't homes, not exactly. They feel older, worn down, but still proud, like they've waited centuries just for someone to notice again. These are temples. And yes, cats are here too. Now, you might think of Egyptian temples first when it comes to feline reverence, and you'd be right. Bastet, lion-headed Sekhmet, all that grandeur and gold. But here in Nubia, temple cats were subtler, more shadow than statue. Still, their presence can't be denied. You step into one of the sanctuaries and the temperature drops by 10 degrees. The cool stone hugs you close, dimming the world to a soft hush. There's a carved pillar to your left with faded images, gods and offerings, of course. But there, just beneath the pattern of stars, a cat, sleek, tail coiled around its paws, unmistakable. Now, scholars still argue whether this figure represents a deity, a symbolic animal, or something else entirely. Nubian belief systems were layered, blended over centuries with Egyptian, Greco-Roman, and indigenous thought. One minute, a god is a lion, then the next, she's a star, then a river, then a whisper. But what stays consistent? Cats always slip through. You wander deeper, where niches in the wall once held oil lamps. There's soot still clinging to the ceiling, proof that someone stood here centuries ago, watching flame dance and shadows stretch. And in one corner, a shrine, small, beautiful, decorated with shells and carved lotus petals. At its center, a seated cat figurine, its ears pointed high. The details are remarkable. Gold leaf still flakes at the tips of the ears. And the eyes, inlaid with fragments of something glassy, probably obsidian, definitely unsettling. It's watching you, but in a cozy kind of way. There's a tablet on the floor half buried in sand. You brush it off carefully, revealing a line of old Meroic script.
Translations are fuzzy, but the rough meaning is, "She who sees in shadow hears the heart." That could mean a goddess, a priestess, or, let's be real, it could mean the cat itself. Because temples like this one weren't just for grand rituals. They were for quiet counsel, meditative prayer. And who better to preside over hush and hidden things than a creature who thrives in the unseen? You sit on the edge of a stone bench, feeling the cool ripple into your skin. A soft breeze passes through the corridor behind you, and you swear, just for a second, you hear a purr. No joke, just a soft, low rumble in the air. You're not alone. There's a belief still whispered among Nubian elders that temple cats never leave. That even when the walls crumble and the carvings fade, some remain. Spirit-bound, fur turned to shadow, watching. And not in a creepy way, more like caretakers, guardians of memory. You pass another chamber now, its floor cracked and uneven, but something catches your eye on the far wall, a mural. Faded, yes, but still vivid in parts. It shows a procession, not of kings or gods, but of cats. Not cartoonish, not mythic, just real-looking cats, striped, spotted, one with a bent tail, all walking in the same direction, toward a door of stars. Above the scene, painted in delicate blue, are the words, "When the sun ends, the watchers rise." You take a slow breath. Because here, in this temple, cats weren't mascots. They were mediators, agents of something in between. They walked ahead of the priests, lit the way to the afterlife, held secrets in their silence. And maybe that's why this place, though ruined, isn't sad. It's peaceful. Outside, the sun has reached its peak. You step into the light, blinking, and spot a modern fence not far off, a newer structure. Curiosity leads you there, and what do you find? An archaeological dig. You glance around, shovels, buckets, tarps, notes scribbled in binders, and at the center of it all, a canvas-covered trench where a young woman crouches with a brush, carefully cleaning something in the dirt. She doesn't notice you at first, too focused, but eventually she looks up, squints, and smiles. "You interested in cats?" she asks, brushing a curl from her forehead. You nod. It feels accurate. She points toward a table covered in plastic sheets. "We've found about a dozen more figurines this month, all feline. Some bronze, one even has lapis lazuli in the eyes." You walk over, gently lifting one of the heavier pieces. It's cool, smooth, and unmistakably cat-like, even after so many centuries underground. She continues, "There's a theory some of these temples had resident cats, living ones I mean, fed by the priests, used to deliver omens." Then she pauses, glances sideways, lowers her voice. "But my favorite theory, some of them were buried beneath the altars, like anchors, spiritual roots." You raise an eyebrow. "That's not published yet," she adds with a grin, still arguing over it. You know historians. "Yeah, you know." You thank her and start walking again, back toward the river, back toward the soft, eternal hush that trails you through this country like warm fur across bare feet. One last image catches your eye before you go, a carved stone set into the hill, high up, barely visible. But once you spot it, you can't look away. It's a cat, again, but this one is stylized, its body made of stars, its tail curves around the moon, and its eyes? Still open, still glowing, even now. You leave the temple behind, your footsteps crunching softly over sand and tiny fragments of pottery, each one a whisper from someone who lived centuries before you even existed. The heat eases off as a breeze picks up, pulling you toward the river again, your old friend, always gliding just out of reach. But tonight, it's not the temples, or the feasts, or the statues that occupy your thoughts. It's a question. Why cats? Why did these ancient Nubians, Tough desert dwellers, proud warriors, skilled artisans bend so deeply toward these small, mysterious creatures. You trail your fingers through tall reeds as you walk, remembering something from a stone carving earlier. A cat curled beneath a royal chair. Not a servant, not chained, just there, comfortable, present. In many ways, cats represented what Nubians valued most: independence, observation, and adaptability. They were neither fully tamed nor wild, just like the people who thrived along this stretch of desert and river. Cats didn't beg, didn't bark orders, didn't charge into battle, but they noticed everything. And noticing things, that mattered. Especially when your survival depended on watching the patterns of the sky, the rhythms of the water, the moods of your goats. There's one record, just a scrap of faded parchment really, where a Nubian scribe scrawled a strange bit of advice. Trust the cat. She hears what you ignore. That feels about right, doesn't it? Historians still argue whether this was meant literally or metaphorically. Was it a spiritual phrase, a poetic caution, or just the scribe venting about a particularly judgy house cat? Hard to say. You reach the edge of a small village now, what remains of one. Just stone outlines and sunken foundations, swallowed by time. A few doorposts still stand, leaning like sleepy sentinels. And behind one, you spot something unexpected. A painted wall, still intact. You crouch for a closer look. It's a home, or was. The scene painted on the plaster shows everyday life. A woman grinding grain, a boy chasing a goat, a cat curled up on a pile of laundry. Then something stranger. On the second panel, the same cat is shown again, but this time it's sitting near a doorframe while smoke rises from a cooking fire. And next to it, a figure, faint, barely visible, outlined in white pigment. You blink. It's not a human. It's something else. Not frightening, but ethereal. And the cat is watching it. You get the eerie sense that the cat sees what no one else does. The people in the painting go about their daily tasks, completely unaware of the pale figure. But the cat? Its eyes are locked on it, alert, calm. Whatever this artist meant to say, it wasn't just a pretty household scene. It was a message. You feel a chill, not from fear, but from awe. Like when you realize a song has lyrics you never noticed. Or when you find out that the quietest person in the room understood everything before anyone spoke. As you walk away, you try to piece together everything you've seen. Nubians didn't just love cats for chasing rats or warming toes, though they definitely did that. They didn't just paint them, praise them, or preserve them in clay. They trusted them. Cats weren't tools or pets or even omens. They were bridges. Between worlds, between what's seen and what's guessed at. They occupied the liminal space, the maybe space that humans rarely feel comfortable in. But Nubians, they leaned into that. They liked things that danced between clear definitions, life and death, land and water, sun and star, power and grace. Which brings you to the river again. It's wide here, wider than you remember. The reeds hum in the breeze, and frogs chirp lazily from their cool mud thrones. You find a flat stone and sit, watching the sun begin to dip, turning the water into molten amber. And then you hear it. A meow. You look around. Nothing. Just reeds. Another meow, closer. And then, padding out from the shadows, comes a cat. Not a grand one, not golden or glowing, just scruffy, with patchy fur and one ear bent like a wilted flower. But it walks with confidence, with purpose, like it's come to check on you. You hold out your hand. It sniffs, blinks, and brushes against your knee. You chuckle. Took you long enough. It curls beside you, not looking at you, but toward the water, like it's expecting something. And sure enough, as the last light flickers, you see the glint of a small boat drifting your way. Not real, not solid, just shimmering. You blink.
Gone. You look down. The cat is asleep. You figure you're probably just tired. Been a long day. But something in you suspects, maybe not. There's one more thing you remember from your walk through those temples, a riddle scratched into a wall, nearly too faded to read. It said, "The lion shouts, the dog barks, but the cat whispers. Listen to the whisper." You look down at your dozing companion.
Night falls slowly, like a soft blanket being drawn over the Nubian sky. You remain on that stone by the river, cat still curled beside you, its purring syncing up with the steady rhythm of the Nile. The heat has dissolved into a gentle warmth, and the stars have begun to push through the indigo veil above, one by one, like old souls checking in for the evening shift. The longer you sit here, the more everything starts to glow in quiet ways. The sand reflecting silver, the reeds swaying like sleepy dancers. Even the river glimmers with a lazy shimmer, as if lit from beneath by a forgotten moon. And in this moment, the question doesn't seem to be, why did Nubians revere cats? It becomes, how could they not? Because when your entire world is balanced on change, floods and droughts, alliances and betrayals, trade and silence, you start to crave something steady, not loud or dominant, but steady. Cats provided that. They didn't argue, didn't demand, didn't need monuments, though they got plenty. They just were, watching, waiting, weaving their mystery through Nubian life like thread in a tapestry. In fact, some of the oldest Nubian proverbs involve cats. One of the more playful ones? Only the foolish ignore a cat's warning or her silence. And then there's one that sticks with you more deeply tonight. Follow the cat and you will not fear the dark. Which might explain where you're heading now. The stars overhead feel brighter than usual, forming strange shapes. One almost looks like a curled tail, another like pointed ears. You're probably imagining it, but aren't you always? You stand up, stretch your legs, and the cat stands with you. No sound, just movement. Together, you walk along the river's edge, guided by moonlight and instinct. The ancient land feels alive beneath your feet, not like the past, but like a dream still in progress. A breeze carries the scent of flowers, papyrus, dust, and something like incense, faint but real. You follow it. Eventually, you reach a place where the land dips gently down, revealing a hidden path between two rock formations. The entrance looks accidental, forgotten, but it pulls you in. The cat moves ahead, tail flicking, leading the way as if it's always known this trail existed. You descend slowly. The air cools again, not cold, but quiet, thick with hush. Down here, the walls pulse with old energy. You swear you see faint carvings, stars, eyes, maybe a cat paw print? You're not sure anymore where memory ends and magic begins. Finally, you reach a chamber. It's circular, natural stone, lit by nothing you can see, yet somehow glowing softly, like the inside of a seashell. And at the center, a raised platform. No statues, no gods, no treasure, just a stone bowl.
And inside it, a single cat curled asleep, not breathing, not decayed, just perfectly preserved, as if it closed its eyes one day and decided to wait. This, you realize, might be one of those legends, one of the cat anchors the archaeologist whispered about, buried not as a sacrifice, but as a protector, a vessel, maybe even a message. You step closer, and just as you do, the sleeping cat opens one eye. Golden, sharp, a mirror to the stars. You freeze, but it doesn't move, doesn't hiss, doesn't vanish. It just watches. And then, ever so slowly, It closes its eye again. Permission granted. You sit cross-legged on the cool floor, the air humming softly around you. The cat by your side curls up again, as if resuming a pause. And suddenly, you feel safe. As if the chaos of history, the arguments of scholars, the uncertainty of memory, all of it has found its balance in this one quiet space. You could stay here forever. But eventually, your eyes begin to close. Your breath deepens. And the last thing you hear? A purr, low and endless. Like the Nile, like time, like the sound of the universe content with itself. And now you rest. The story folds gently into silence, like the last page of a well-loved book falling shut. You're still surrounded by warm stone, starlit skies, and the quiet presence of a watchful cat. Or maybe just the memory of one. Your breath slows, your muscles melt into stillness. Each sound fades, first the frogs, then the breeze, then even the hum of the distant water, until it's just you and the soft cradle of the night. Let your thoughts drift like tiny boats along the river. No direction, no hurry, just the gentle movement forward. Everything you saw today, the temples, the painted walls, the carved paws, the goddess watching through obsidian eyes, it's all still with you, tucked somewhere quiet in the folds of your mind. And maybe, as you dream, you'll return to a land of sun and shadow, of ancient cats and sacred silence, a place where time doesn't rush, but stretches out like a lion in the sand, content to watch and wait. So, let your eyes grow heavier. Let your breath carry you deeper. You are safe. You are warm. And somewhere in the dark, a cat keeps watch. Always.
you.